Hey, crime fighters and true crime junkies. This is Derek Jubb, the Cowboy Criminologist with Cowboy Criminology. So last week I posted a video uh, asking the question, do we need cashless bond? And first off, I want to say I got some helpful comments. One was about shortening the intro a little bit to help get more clicks. So I'm going to give that a shot. And one was not very helpful. In the comment, the poster said that I was being ignorant about how cashless bond worked, and that the individual in the video did not, in fact, get cashless bond. Okay, that was not the point of the video. The point of the video is when crime is out of control in your jurisdiction, why in the world do you make it easier for people to offend? And so, just to make sure that I wasn't riding some conservative high horse about it, maybe my opinion about it isn't as bad as it is. Okay, so I actually had to go out and look for signs of the apocalypse, because The View and the Young Turks, two extremely liberal leaning shows, were blasting Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, and I've talked about her on this show several times, about the rising crime rate, and also calling in the National Guard in order to do spot checks on bags and things like that, which have only seemed to escalate crime in New York. Okay. Now, the problem with the problem with this whole thing is crime is out of control in this jurisdiction. And cashless bond and this sliding scale, to be more social justice minded is basically how all this started. Is a good idea in principle, all right? Because you want to be fair. You've got the Eighth Amendment to consider. Okay. I am a strict constitutionalist, and I believe there's little room for interpretation of the Constitution. I believe it's a perfect document. It was perfect when it was written, and that's why the changes to the Constitution have been very slow. Okay. The Eighth Amendment says no excessive fine or bail, and no cruel or unusual punishment. Okay. Let's talk about proportionality to the crime that's been committed. And I looked up the requirements for the cashless bond just to make sure that I wasn't interpreting it the way I wanted to. And y'all, I got a headache reading it. It's the most convoluted document I think I've ever read. And I read the Communist Manifesto, and I've read the Anarchist Cookbook, and those made better points and made better sense than New York's cashless bond law. Okay. The idea behind it is that low-level criminal activity is, you're released, what they call ROR, released on own recognizance. And that happens sometimes. Where I live in Texas, we have a lot of small jails, and they can't hold a whole lot of individuals. So when you have people who have certain medical needs or things like that, if it's a low-level crime, a sheriff will do a sheriff's bond, which is essentially the ROR bond, but it's instituted by the sheriff instead of a judge or justice of the peace. Okay, it's I'm not going to say it's very common up here, but especially smaller jails that don't have medical facilities. Now, obviously, if you have a crime, somebody arrested for a very serious offense, that's not appropriate. So what you're going to do is you're going to contact a neighboring jurisdiction, and you're going to work out something. I was a jail administrator, and that happened a few times where I had to call up another jurisdiction that had medical facilities to take care of an inmate and explain the situation, and we'd work something out. Sometimes I'd even take, if they needed it, because they were almost to capacity, I'd offer to take one or two of their guys and just call it a fair trade, and we wouldn't, they wouldn't charge us for holding our prisoner. We wouldn't charge for holding their prisoner. We just tried to help each other out. Jail administrators up where I live are kind of like the Lance Corporal or the Lance Corporal Underground, or the E3 Mafia, whatever you want to call them. We get things done, and we have to have that connection. We have to have that sense of community to make things happen. But when you're looking at these types of criminal offenses, okay, yeah, you want to hold people accountable, but you want to be fair about it. So the sliding scale based on income, one thing or another, is not a bad idea on the whole, and especially when jail space comes at a premium. Okay, jail overcrowding is obviously a huge problem. Okay, explain the problem that a lot of these big cities that wanted to defund the police and wanted to cut police department budgets and do hiring freezes for officers, things like that. Explain something. So when you make it your policy to not prosecute low-level offenders, and prosecutors in New York said that they weren't going to prosecute what they deemed to be nonviolent or low-level offenses. Okay, as a prosecutor, they have that right. Okay, the problem is when you fail to hold criminals accountable, they go out and they start committing more serious, more violent crimes. Okay, it's an escalation of behavior. It's not very few criminals get in trouble, go to jail, get a break where they, they could have thrown the book at me. They could have really sent me up the river, but they showed me mercy. Obviously, I need to change my ways. Y'all, it doesn't happen like that. All right. The people who do have that revelation are usually people who, for whatever reason, just decided one night just to do something really, really stupid. Okay. So anyway, but the other problem is when you fail to prosecute those crimes, you allow that to happen. Now, because of the buildup, because you're not prosecuting these individuals, you're not putting them in jail, you do have a backlog because they keep going out. It's a revolving door. They keep getting kicked out of the courtroom, picked up by the police, put back in jail, only for you to cut them loose again, over and over and over again. Okay? So, Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, and the chief of police have released crime statistics for New York for the first quarter of 2024. A shock to absolutely nobody. They're horrible. Now, Kathy Hochul says crime is up everywhere, and that's an economic issue. When the economy is bad, crime rates go up. When the economy is good, crime rates go down. There is a socioeconomic correlation there. Okay, you can't really separate the two. Okay, now you take a bad economy and you take horrible criminal justice policies where you embolden criminals to do pretty much whatever they want because they don't fear the consequences. They don't fear going to jail because they know they're going to be out in a little bit of no time. Now, the poster said that, cashless bond doesn't work this way, one thing or another. But California and New York seem to have a problem of letting people out under this social justice, cashless bond, reduced bond system and losing their offenders. If you happen to remember, it wasn't that long ago that 2 officers in New York City were assaulted by 2 illegal immigrants. And they spent less than 2 days in jail, and then they ended up losing one. Had no idea where he was. Put out a nationwide alert. He was picked up in Arizona. Now, if you want to know how much distance he traveled, you can pick up your little phone, get on your computer, and you can say, hey, how far is New York from Arizona, or vice versa? And you will see that he traveled a good long ways. Why did he do that? Well, because he was free when he shouldn't have been. But California, New York, Illinois, they've set up this system where it makes it easier for people to offend and evade justice. That's what's creating the backlog in the court system. Okay? You've got accountability is a big part of that. All right. And I totally get wanting to have a fair justice system. All right. That's the whole point of Cowboy Criminology, getting to the truth behind true crime. Okay. Is you want to apply the legal standards. You want to apply it fairly across the board. Okay. But when you're ignoring criminal history, case in point, Illinois, the Illinois Parole Board, which y'all please don't get me started, because the number of lawyers and police officers on that board released a man who was out less than 24 hours before he murdered an 11-year-old boy who was trying to protect his pregnant mother. The pregnant mother actually had filed for a court hearing against this individual. Now, 2 members of the Illinois Parole Board resigned, which they absolutely should have. And it should have been followed by the other 9 people who are on there. You cannot tell me that you didn't have enough information to see that this person was a threat. You have to look at, you have to take the individual, you have to take their actions as a whole. You have to look at their criminal history. You're allowed to do that when you're recommending bond. You're allowed to do that in sentencing. The only time you cannot bring up somebody else's previous criminal behavior is in their trial. All right, it doesn't work that way, because you're not trying them for everything they've ever done. You're trying them for a specific criminal offense. Okay, but when you're sitting there and you're constantly saying, well, we're just looking at this crime, we're just looking right here, and we've got our little matrix, and if he meets, if the points meet up here and they meet up here, we recommend parole, or we recommend probation, or we recommend bond. And we're going to set the bond here because, he's such a nice guy. Y'all, it doesn't work that way. An 11-year-old boy is dead. His mother's going to have to live with that. Somewhere in Illinois, I would think there's a judge who's absolutely livid. And maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit. But I know if I was the judge, I would be ordering bailiffs to go and pick those folks up for contempt of court. They had that document in their possession. They admitted to having it, but due to some cosmic oversight, they didn't do it. But you know what? Even if they didn't have that little piece of paper, they had his criminal history. Some people deserve parole. All right. Some people make a horrible mistake, even up to and including murder. And they did it in a fit of anger. They did it under the influence of drugs or alcohol, whatever the case is. But they go to prison and they learn from their mistakes. They try to better themselves while they're in prison. When you look at these things, a lot of these individuals who are out at the mercy of the court, at the mercy of the parole board and things like that, you have to look. Why are we going through and why are we releasing prisoners that shouldn't be arrested? I'm especially disappointed with Illinois. Like I said, there's a number of attorneys on there who have experience either as prosecutors or defense attorneys, several that have law enforcement backgrounds, chiefs of police, people who should have known better. and only 2 of those individuals resigned, and it should have been the entire board. And I think if I was the governor of Illinois, because I'm not soft on crime like Governor Pritzker, I would be demanding their resignations. As a matter of fact, I'd just give every one of them a call and say, you know what, you're all out. You're done. We're gonna rebuild this from scratch. Unless somebody in there had common sense to vote against it. Okay? But that's the overall problem. Okay? It's a lack of accountability in criminal justice and knowing how to understand criminal behavior, an escalation in criminal behavior. This case in Illinois I'm talking about stems from domestic violence. Domestic violence is an escalating behavior, and usually it escalates to the point where somebody ends up dead, which is exactly what happened here. It was 100% foreseeable, it was 100% preventable. Okay? So the video last week, yeah, I get it. That guy's probably not out on a cashless bond, but I have no doubt that he's probably out right now. And that's got to be very scary to the victims. Here's another case in point. You have these young women who are walking around New York City. They can't even walk down their own street without being assaulted. And there are TikToks and Instagrams, all this stuff on social media blowing up with women holding up their phones showing how they were just assaulted and then getting video of the person that assaulted them. This person has a history of assaulting and harassing women, walking down the street, not letting them be. These women obviously not interested in the conversation, but they keep following. Or he keeps following. He's out on bond. Squatters found with drugs and guns, 6 of them, released without bond. Okay? The bond process is to impress upon the individual the seriousness of their actions to change their ways so they can get to court and hopefully realize what a mistake they've made and move on. But that's not the case. So if you want to say I'm ignorant about how cashless bond works, yeah, you're probably right, because it's a stupid idea. Bond is meant to ensure the presence of somebody in court. You release somebody on a cashless bond, they've got no skin in the game. And they're going to go out and they're going to continue to offend. And you can sit there, well, they were busted for something very low level. Maybe it was drugs. Maybe it was just a simple assault. Was it a simple assault, or were they attempting to abduct, kidnap, rape, and murder somebody? You don't know. All right. So it's very scary to me that we're championing that. And like I said, when the View and the Young Turks were talking to Kathy Hochul about how crime is just out of control in the state of New York, it made me realize something very important. It's not me that's ignorant. It's the policies that are ignorant. And the fact of the matter is, you have the New York City Police Department, which boasts, I think, 37,000 officers, somewhere in that ballpark, to deal with a city of, 8 million? It's overrun. And it's overrun because the governor, the legislator, the mayor, and the prosecutors fail to recognize the problem, fail to recognize policies and procedures that would deal with the problem, and build the New York City Police Department up where they can actually deal with the crime. When you have to call in the National Guard to help you with law enforcement functions, you're already behind the 8 ball. You've already lost the game. And by the way, crime in the subway, still up like it was. It hasn't fixed anything. It hasn't been a deterrent. What needs to be a deterrent is when officers arrest somebody and they're held in jail. Now, yeah, obviously they're going to be out on bond, but those bond conditions need to be stringent enough that you always know where your suspect is. And when you get them to court and you get them prosecuted, you prosecute. You prosecute to the fullest extent of the law, especially if they have a long criminal history. There doesn't need to be a plea agreement. Doesn't need to be a, well, this is less serious than the last time you were in my courtroom. No, 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 no. It's not that this is less serious. The escalation is still there. The fact that you have to say this is a less serious crime means he hasn't learned. Lock him away. Max out his time. And for those of you on parole boards, start looking at the behavior of the individual overall. Don't just look at their past criminal behavior. Don't just look at their time in prison. Look at what they've accomplished in prison, if they've accomplished anything. And you know what? Most importantly, why don't you check to make sure that they don't have any other litigation waiting for them? Like they don't have any court proceedings. A couple of phone calls is all that would have taken to prevent a horrible tragedy. But you get a lot of these people, they're on these boards and they, it gives them this sense of accomplishment. Oh, I've been appointed by the governor to be on this board. Well, you know what? You failed. You failed. You put your failure out there for everybody to see. I think if I was an attorney in Illinois, I would be looking at setting up a class action lawsuit to go after the state of Illinois in order to recover losses and damages for wrongful death, destruction of property, robbery, assault. Go back and look at all of these bad actors that these parole boards have let out or released on cashless bond and hold the state accountable. They're the ones who said this was a great idea. Class action lawsuit all the way around. Make the states pay. And when they have to pay out to their constituents that they have failed, maybe things will change. Y'all, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, and share on your favorite social media channels. This is Derek Judd with Cowboy Criminology. Y'all take care.